drop the thing because they say this guy knows too much?
Well, I don't know if they're really looking at it that way, but I think what they're doing is they're realizing that this guy is presenting us with questions and asking for evidence that we just are not familiar with.
We don't have.
Yeah, I don't know if they're necessarily admitting they don't have them. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I think what they're realizing is that they're in way over their head. So what they'll typically do is they'll say that I had a hearing officer, and she's on one of my videos, where she admits she's not qualified to say my client has taxable income. That's a pretty see, you got to scapegoat somebody. I can't just go in there and make assertions that, taxation is theft. It is, but that's not going to win me any points. I have to scapegoat somebody. I have to give them a way out. So like in traffic court with the police officer, we scapegoat the cop. We don't try to attack the system. We Mark's an idiot. He was lucky because the cop or the prosecutor, he wasn't prepared that day. And so we scapegoat. Here we have an agent that says they're not qualified. It doesn't mean that income taxes are invalid. It just means in this particular instance, Mark got a really dumb agent or an ignorant agent, and that's it.
It's 10 minutes before the hour. We're with Mark Stevens. This is fascinating stuff. MarcStevens.net, MarcStevens.net. If you just tuned in, he's essentially saying that the whole system kind of government thing is just a big Wizard of Oz. And so for people, our listeners now, who are saying, wow, scratching their head, I would assume that most of us, people and the people that will hear this podcast, Mark Stevens, and most of the people you run into, do they get to the point, though, where they say, I really understand where this fellow's coming from. I mean, I don't really understand it, but I think I know, I believe what he's saying. But I'm not going to go into some court and say this because I'm scared and I don't want to do the wrong thing and do the traffic court, and maybe it's easier just to pay a $50 fine and pay my taxes and go on my way. I guess a lot of people feel like that.
Yeah, I think it's actually set that way on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I used to have a weeding out process. And when someone came to me, because I used to do a lot of traffic stuff here in Phoenix.
Right.
And and I've been like anybody else in business. I've been burned. And so what I would do is I would ask people, I would tell them, I said, look, point blank, it's going to cost you more money for me to help you get this thrown out than it is just to pay it.
Just to pay it, right.
And 99% of the time, people say, this is not about the money. I didn't do anything wrong. This is wrong, and I'm not going to give in to these, blankety blank.
They do it just because they want to do it.
Yeah, they most of the people that I work with, and they look. If I got somebody who just didn't want to pay, they're not going. Chances are they're not going to pay me for my time. So I steer away from. But I haven't had anyone like that in a while. But most of the people I work with are good, honest people that have not hurt anybody, and they've done nothing to justify what is being done to them. Now, some people have made really bad errors in judgment as far as how they dealt with the IRS or how they dealt with traffic, or some people just blow it off and it just escalates. So there's some people I'm helping clean that up. That's unfortunate, but it happens. I mean, I'm working with somebody who just blew off everything the IRS sent them,
which is not a good idea.
It really isn't, because if you can get it at the earliest possible letter, if you start your letter, look, we're being successful in the tax court. We had the IRS's motion for summary judgment denied, and we've moved into discovery, which is why we did the pretrial conference. We were able to get at least this far, because the tax court's a joke. Those guys they're idiots. I shouldn't say that, but it's a joke. And no one should go into the tax court unless they have to. And they have a really good factual background. Because we're able to do two things which most people aren't doing when they go in and challenge them. We not only have the grounds, or the reason why the assessment should be, or the accusation should be vacated. We actually have the factual grounds. We're not making legal arguments as support. So we're able to show, look, we tried to settle with these people every single step of the way. We called and we faxed and we had letters, and all we wanted to know if there were witnesses and evidence. That's all we wanted. And the important thing here is that when you're asking for facts, they are supposed to, in good faith, disclose that to you because their presumption of correctness doesn't arise unless there's facts. So you at least have something you've got in law called a presumption, where the fact not appearing is presumed not to exist. And that's not the same as if you're just asking questions on what law makes me liable, what law does this, what definition of income, what definition of taxpayer. So we have this when we go in, it is the reason why the accusation should be thrown out is because it's arbitrary. Well, what are my facts to prove that? Well, I asked you, and you said there were no witnesses. So I'm able to build a factual timeline to raise this presumption that the court is obligated to accept. Which that doesn't mean that they're going to, but they, that it's a much firmer, or much more solid, grounds to be on as opposed to show me the law.
Mm-hmm. Here's an email from Emily. She is in Washington State. Oh, she said, I'm finding this fascinating. I'm paraphrasing. What can I do if I work for someone and they're taking taxes out of my check, but I'd like to learn how to not pay my income taxes if it's not legally binding to do so?
Well, remember, they're not your, or she said my income taxes. It's just an extortion. It's just a demand for money. It's a tough one. The people that you're working with, unless you know them pretty well and they're willing to be stand-up people and having some integrity, like the late Dick Richardson Cannon, who actually did that as a so-called employer, would not withhold, and they put him in jail, and he just passed away a few weeks ago.
Oh yeah, I read about that.
Very sad. If they're not willing to do that, then the other way to do it is to one, if you're able to, because it all comes down to cutting off the paper trail. If you're able to work on your own as a contractor and then contract with the company. Or if you work through a third-party contractor, where what I used to do for people is, we unfortunately don't do this anymore, but there are other companies that do this. We acted as a contracting company, so we were the middleman, so to speak, so that there was no paper trail for the contractor that we contracted with. Mm-hmm. And, so I would handle the calls for the very few problems that we had where initially getting a contract where they said, well, how is so-and-so not my employee if he comes to my place of business and uses my tools at hours set by me? How is he not my employee? I said, well, have you ever hired a temp? Yeah. Well, works the same way. The temp comes in and they're not your employee, are they? Well, no. Okay. And then, so that's kind of the way it worked. Mm-hmm. But there wouldn't be any paper trail. There'd be no reporting to the Killers, Thieves, and Lies in D.C. or Ogden or Fresno, wherever.
Is there any relevance, protection, or advantages, Mark Stevens, to have some corporations that one works with for their stuff? Is there ever
I wouldn't use a corporation because what you're doing is you're asking the Killers, Thieves, and Liars at the Capitol for a privilege so that you can have some insulation from your customers. Mm-hmm. And that you have bankruptcy protection, things like this. And the basis of the power to tax, as they've told us many, many times, is it has the state or the feds given something for which it can ask a return. So if you're doing business as a corporation, because you don't have to, then it is taxable. So I would suggest using a business trust, but I would not call it a pure trust. If you call it a pure trust, you're going to get attacked. It's that simple.
What's a business trust?
You just set up a business. I don't know really. It's just like a trust, but you're setting it up to conduct business. But you have to make sure that you do it properly. You don't have the settlor and the trustee being the same person. You have to go and you have to make it legitimate. That doesn't mean it has to be statutory. It doesn't mean you have to file it with the Secretary of State. But you want to make sure you set it up properly as a trust, and you can do business through that. But that if you go to the government, these Killers, Thieves, and Liars, and you get a benefit from them, a privilege, such as a corporation or a limited an LLC, then it is taxable. It's very, very difficult to make a principled argument or take a principled position that's not taxable.
What kind of things, and then we're going to get into the Declaration of Independence, Social Security benefits, and stuff like that after this top of the hour break. But a little plug for your book called Adventures in Legal Land, and you have a new one coming out. What kind of things do you go through, Mark Stevens, with that one that folks will find on MarcStevens.net?
Adventures in Legal Land, I go through, it started as a script, which I still sell, by the way, but they've been updated, that I used for, to help people in court when I wasn't able to be there. And it grew from asking, because I knew that just asking the questions without knowing why you're asking, the foundation, that you could be eaten alive. The judge would notice you just reading from a script and he'd tear you to pieces. So it grew from me explaining why. Because one of the most effective questions to completely destroy the facade of legitimacy the judge is trying to maintain, and it works every time. Not that it gets thrown out, but you will, because when you go to court, you're working to destroy the facade that it's a legitimate proceeding. And so one of the most effective ways to do that is to ask the judge who he represents. But you need to know the background, really, so that you can stand there confidently and you can respond to him appropriately. And so that's what we have in the book. I go through why I'm asking these questions, why they're so effective, and the background as to why. We need to know why I'm asking the judge who he represents so we can accurately stand our ground in court and defend it ourselves.
I would think that 99% or most of the people listening right now never want to go to court, right?
Oh, I'm
right there with you. Okay, and you're yeah. So we know we don't want to go, but I would think just because of our kind of dysfunctional relationship we have with this entity called the government, which you doesn't really exist, that it would be interesting to understand this. It might give folks more, just feel a little more confident about some positions they may be taking in the years to come if things get more interesting. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that the book does in the scripts and the workshops that I do, because I'm doing another workshop in McAllen, Texas next month.
Oh, you are?
It's to empower people. So, and that's one of the things I want to accomplish by posting that IRS phone call, so that you can hear you don't need to have a doctorate degree. You don't need to go to law school. You just need some basic understanding, and you can go in and stand up for yourself. It's just but you don't want to be one of these people that has just enough information to get themselves in trouble.
Yeah. That's not good.
So that's why I wrote the book, and I do all this so that you understand when you're asking the judge who he represents. It's a very, very effective question. However, you could elicit a very emotional response from the judge. Because in the context that I asked the question, I've asked him two previous questions leading him into this corner, and I don't want him getting out. I want him to throw the ticket out. I want him to leave me alone. And it's it's a not so subtle way of telling the judge, look, I understand what's going on here better than you do, and I'm going to make it impossible for you to make this look good. So please take the easy way out and just throw the ticket away. Please. Oh. That's what I'm trying to accomplish, and that's what happens most of the time. But you have to understand, you're gutting his entire presumption of legitimacy by that one question, and he cannot get out of it. There's no way.
It's almost like asking the American Medical Association to admit that cancer is a man-made disease kind of thing, and we could just prevent it rather than trying to find this cure, where they spend billions and billions of dollars trying to find the cure of something that we cause.
It's just like when they started enriching rice. They realized that by polishing the rice, they realized, we're destroying the nutritional value. Let's try to put it back in.
All right, let's take a quick break. Mark Stevens, MarcStevens.net. Hope you're enjoying this. If you care to join us, 888-663-6386. We'll put you on hold, pick it up live on the air. Also, emails Patrick at OneRadioNetwork.com.